Puss in Boots, World Famous Tales. Once upon a time, there was a poor miller who had grown quite old. On the eve of his death, he had only a mule, and a cat to leave for his three sons. When the miller had died, two elder sons took the meal and the mule respectively and left the house. They left behind only the cat for the youngest son. The youngest son was very sad. Holding the cat, he sighed, I have nothing but this cat. It may feed itself by catching mice. As for me, I shall soon die of hunger. The cat overheard his young master's word, jumped out of his hands, and spoke, I'm not as useless as you think me to be, master. Get me a pair of boots and see how I can make your fortune shine before long. The young miller was rather surprised to see his cat speaking like a man. So he made up his mind to try it. He spent all he possessed to buy a smart pair of leather boots for the cat. The cat put on the boots, which fitted it perfectly. Its master gave it the name Puss in Boots. With pride and dignity, Puss went for a stroll. While passing by the royal palace, a clever idea struck its mind. The next day, Puss trotted off to a neighboring warren in which he knew there were a great number of rabbits. He laid a trap with ripe carrots in it. Then he lay in wait. A foolish rabbit, sensing the smell of the carrots, ran straight into the trap and the clever cat caught it. Carrying the rabbit over his back, Puss went to the royal palace. Where are you taking this rabbit? Asked the sentry. I have a present for his majesty, replied Puss. Reaching the royal presence, Puss bowed and said, Your Majesty, I have brought you a present from the Duke of Carabas. The king was very pleased to see the present. From that day on, every morning, Puss went to the forest and caught an animal to be presented to the king. One day, he caught two wild birds and went to the palace to lay them at the royal feet. The king took the birds most gladly and said, Thank your master on my behalf for the presents and tell him that I am very much obliged to him. One day, Puss came to know that the king was intending to go on a drive along the riverside with his daughter the next day. So it went to its master and said, Master, if you follow my advice, your fortune is sure to shine very soon. Puss persuaded the miller's son to go and bathe in the river, saying, Remember that you are no longer the miller's son, but my lord, the Duke of Carabas. The miller's son got into the river, wondering what was to happen next. When the king's carriage came into sight, Puss took away its master's clothes and hid them under a big rock. Then Puss ran towards the king's carriage and shouted, Help! Help! Thieves have thrown my master into the river and stolen his clothes. He is going to be drowned. The king got down the carriage and recognized the cat that had brought him so many presents. He ordered his coachman to go and help the duke out of the water and asked one of his attendants to ride back to the palace and bring elegant clothes for the young duke. The miller's son was a handsome fellow. The new clothes made him all the more chic. He looked just like a real prince. The king and his daughter were so pleased with his appearance that they invited him into their carriage. The young boy sat into the carriage and the cat ran ahead of them to carry out his plan. So soon he came to a cornfield where some reapers were at work. Oh, good people, said the cat, the king's carriage will pass this way shortly. If he asks you, who you are working for, you must say that you are working for the Duke. Soon the king's carriage arrived there, and the king asked one of the reapers, "Whose fields are these?" "We work for the Duke of Carabas. He owns all this land," replied the reaper. The king was very impressed to know this. Running ahead, the clever cat arrived at a great castle which belonged to a cruel ogre. He was known for his black magic. Puss knocked at the door and demanded to see the ogre, who received him with a broad smile, for he had never seen a cat in boots ever before. Puss entered the castle and said, "I have heard that you are famous for your miracles. You possess the power of changing yourself into any kind of animal, a lion or an elephant, for example." Feeling flattered, the ogre replied, "Yes, I can." And he changed himself into a lion at once. The cat got frightened and prayed the ogre to change back to his original form, which he did instantly. Complimenting the ogre again, the clever cat said, "It was all the very wonderful. Can you transform yourself into some timid little creature like a mouse?" "Why not?" said the ogre, and he turned himself into a mouse. This was exactly what Puss wanted. The clever cat pounced on him and ate the mouse up in no time, and this was how the ogre met with his end. The splendid castle of the ogre now belonged to the cat. A few minutes later, the king's carriage reached near the castle. Puss ran forward in great hurry and, bowing before the king, said, "Welcome, your majesty, to the duke's castle." "It's splendid," said the king. Both the king and the princess were really impressed to know about the riches of the young man. As for the duke himself, he felt proud of the cleverness of Puss. Now it was time for dinner. Rich dishes were prepared in the castle, and all of them sat down for a feast. The king was very impressed. He thought, "The Duke of Carabas is a great man. I should offer my daughter's hand to him." After the feast had been over, Puss led the king to a great hall where a group of noble gentlemen and fair ladies were waiting. The king announced his daughter's marriage to the miller's son, who was now called the Duke of Carabas. Soon the marriage of the Duke of Carabas and the king's daughter was performed with royal fanfare. There were great rejoicings throughout the land. The new-wed couple waved to the subjects, who showered their blessings with shouts, "Long live the new-wed couple!" Poor miller's son thanked Puss in Boots, who had made him a rich, famous duke. He took possession of Ogre's castle and of everything that once belonged to him. The new-wed couple lived very happily there. Puss also lived like a prince in the castle. He was the happiest of all, as he had never to run after mice. He often envied his own luck and danced in joy. The end.